Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to build something absolutely ridiculous because in my hands is the brand new Ryzen 7 9800X3D CPU, which is the fastest gaming processor on the planet, and we're going to be pairing this with an RTX 4080 Super to show you exactly what this kind of money can get you when it comes to gaming performance. We're going to walk you through all the components that we have on our desk and hopefully show you how to create an epic gaming PC, and of course we'll be showing you those all-important gameplay benchmark numbers so you can see how an RTX 4080 Super and the brand new 9800X3D actually perform in games. So let's see then whether these components can rise to the challenge, right after saying a massive thank you to MSI for proudly sponsoring this video. So yeah, if you can't already tell, I'm pretty excited about this one, and realistically, obviously this is still going to be a very high-end rig, make no bones about it. It's definitely not going to be the cheapest thing out there, but if you do want to like play on a 4K screen, 4K television, you're happy to use DLSS, but you don't want to use like DLSS performance, all of that good stuff, you still want ray tracing. I don't even want to use the word affordable. Technically it's correct, but it costs a lot less than the 4090 gaming PC, and actually one of the ways that we can do that is by going for an X870 rather than X870 motherboard. So this is the Tomahawk Wi-Fi. Clue being in the name, it does come with Wi-Fi. I think this one actually is Wi-Fi 7 as well. You do get USB 4 on X870 as well, which is a nice touch. I wouldn't say this is obviously going to be like the be-all and end-all for everyone, but obviously if you are building a gaming PC, you want this to last a long time, so having decent connectivity and a high-spec motherboard obviously is going to help. You do also have this supplementary PCIe power. That's an 8-pin. That's something to bear in mind and plug that in if you can, if you're going to use like the full I/O essentially of the board and all of the PCIe. You do have two M.2 slots that actually are completely toolless, which is nice, and this mechanism has been improved, so it's a lot easier to just quickly take on and off, which is good. You do have two more M.2 slots under here as well. Two of these slots are PCI Gen 5, which is nice, and then the other two are PCI Gen 4, and then this top slot for your graphics card is also PCI Gen 5, so if you're going to upgrade this to something like a 5080, 5090, then obviously you are going to, in theory, have the bandwidth not to limit you at all, but we don't know about those cards because they haven't been released yet. One of the other cool things actually about this motherboard is that you do have two USB 3 headers on the board itself. You have this quick release as well for the PCIe, love that. You can update the BIOS over USB with the BIOS flashing utility, which is cool. As I say, you've got that Wi-Fi 7, and then just for clarity, if you're getting faster than gigabit speeds into your house, you will need some new hardware, probably a new router to be able to accommodate it. So you can do that with a Wi-Fi 7, or this actually comes with a 5 gig Ethernet port if you're gonna like pipe it straight in essentially from a fast router. That makes sense? Sorry for being lame. But something that definitely isn't lame is, of course, the brand new CPU from AMD, this one being the 9800X3D. It's an 8-core chip. Rumors have it that they will also bringing out like a 9950X3D, 9900X3D in the coming months. So if you do want to go for a high core count X3D chip, then it might be worth waiting to see whether those are any good, but obviously we don't know at the time of filming. But for most people, this is still going to be the absolute best of the best, really, especially in terms of like 1% lows, and if you're playing like really CPU demanding games or multiplayer and you want the absolute highest FPS possible, then this is definitely going to help. But if you are in a situation where you're not rocking a 4080, 4090 or any other really high-end GPU, and you pretty much only play games that are bound by the CPU, bound by the GPU, then obviously buying a new CPU isn't actually going to help you necessarily, and that money probably should go into upgrading your graphics card, especially bearing in mind that, again, rumors are showing that we have new NVIDIA cards coming in the not too distant future. That may well be a better use of your money. I was also very pleasantly impressed, pleasantly surprised, by the fact that the 9800X3D didn't really have different thermals to the outgoing 7800X3D, at least in our testing. And the reason for this is, despite the fact that they've increased the TDP so it uses more power, because the V-cache is actually now underneath the die, whereas before it was on top, it's affected the chip thermally and it just works more efficiently essentially. So I don't think you need like a crazy high-end cooler. So what we're going to do is use something that on a really good day you can get for only about like $25 or something in the States. Even on a bad day you're looking at about 30. And obviously this will save you getting on for what, 100 quid, $100 versus a 360 rad. So if you don't need to do that, then obviously you can focus all of your performance, well, focus all of your money into performance, because that $100 is literally the difference between a 7800X3D and a 9800X3D. So as long as this does work and we have a nice quiet system and it doesn't overheat and doesn't get crazy hot, I think this is going to be the way to go. But we don't know yet. That's why we're doing this. It's called trial and error. And I never make errors. I only trial. Let's remove the default AM5 mount, replace it with the one from Arctic, add a bit of thermal compound in the middle, cooler then goes on the top, and then my personal favourite bit, making our cooler sandwich. You literally just grab them, push them in, and then once you've plugged them in, that's it. How easy is that? Just plug into CPU fan 1, and then I was going to say plug into addressable RGB 1, but I've got to say there's a lot of stuff on this board that I really love, but it seems as if there's not an addressable RGB header at the top. You've got loads, but they're down the bottom, look, 1, 2, and 3. I think it will be fine with our configuration because I can daisy chain it, but that is an odd addition to not have one at the top. Save that for on then. And I do realise at this point that I've got a little bit too excited and I should have actually done the RAM and the SSD first. But hey, it goes to show it doesn't technically matter which order you do things in. It's just there's a right way of doing it because it can make things easier, but shouldn't be a problem. SSD, this is actually a brand new one for the channel. It's run from Acer Predator that they supplied. GM7000 is a 2TB PCI Gen 4 SSD. I think the read speeds of this are about 7,000 and then the writes are 6,400, but obviously depends on the exact specification that you go for. Line this up with the slot, then you can pick up your heatsink, make sure that you have taken the plastic wrapper off, then just secure this into position. And then once you've done that, there's just one component left to go before we can actually start building inside our case. That of course being the memory or the RAM. This one is DDR5, DDR4 will not work with AM5, so please don't make that mistake. In terms of performance, I'd say for AMD, you're looking at 6,000 megahertz, probably like CL30 or one like this, that's CL32. This is actually slightly faster, it's 6,400 mega transfers a second. If you go faster than 6,000 megahertz, the performance isn't drastically different, but the kits do go up in price. So I'm going to do a few experiments with this today, which is why we're using it, but 6,000 megahertz is probably your safest bet. Just push that down into position in slots 2 and slots 4. And then, and only then, you can move on to your chassis. I mean, let's be honest, at this stage, you've probably already had a fiddle with all your components, been opening boxes as they've arrived, because building a gaming PC is incredibly exciting. I know we do this a lot on the channel, but even so, every time I get something new in, I can't help but just kind of scour through the box, look at everything in great detail. It's great fun. We're nerds here, that's okay, we love it. And you're going to do the same with the case, right? So this is actually a new one from MSI. This is the Pano 100R PZ. PZ actually stands for Project Zero. So if you wanted to use one of their Project Zero motherboards in this, then you'll see when we actually take this glass off, that's nice and thick, that you will have extra cutouts here, look. So it looks slightly odd at the moment when we don't have the motherboard in place, but that's so if you want to put a motherboard that has the connections on the back, obviously it will still work in here, and then you plug everything around the back and you get like the tidiest build ever. And I've got to say, this is actually one of my favorite looking MSI cases ever, really, because I do see why a lot of manufacturers are moving towards curved glass on their premium cases. I get it, but at the time of filming, curving glass is really expensive, and it means that the price of the case will go up quite dramatically, when personally speaking, I don't really mind. If anything, I quite like the look of this kind of like edginess by having the separate panels. I mean, this is almost kind of like slightly height style, I suppose, in the way that it's done, but MSI have made it their own, so I think this is a pretty nice looking chassis. And this is almost like a bit of a hybrid, so it is dual chamber, but it's not as tall as a normal chassis, but then it's not quite as wide as like a big dual chamber either. So it's kind of sits in the middle. It's quite nice, really. You've got mesh pretty much throughout. Certainly looks very premium. And then as you can see, obviously if you want to like add extra things here, you have a decent amount of room actually, and it's relatively modular by the looks of it. So you can take your bits out, power supply is going to go here. You've got this little hub at the top as well, so you can plug a load of addressable RGB fans and things in. So this comes out like that, then this comes out and removes. You will have to make sure that these are all nice and neat though. What's in the box? What's in the box? This looks like an alternative faceplate if you don't want to use a vertical GPU. I think that the riser is actually sold separately, but it might depend on the version that you're going for. And I will hand it actually to MSI that they do have one of the best modular systems for vertical GPUs. It really is just a case of pushing it in, if you can get it the right way around. 4 times the charm, pushing it in, and then you use these little thumb screws like just to secure it, so dead easy. Then we can grab our case and lay it down flat. Obviously we do have 4 addressable RGB fans as standard. We can add extra ones down the bottom or like radiators and fans and things at the top. We can pick up our board, press that into position, screw it down into place. Let's start plugging in all of our connections though. We've got USB Type-C on the side, USB 3 below that, power switch and LEDs down the bottom, HD audio bottom left. We've also got our addressable RGB down here at the bottom. We can use System Fan 1 for our fan hub. And then when we give this a spin round, I'll show you the back. All I've done actually, very simple with this one, was just to plug in our cooler to one of the daisy chainable fan sections on here really. Just, as I say, is quite a lot. There's no getting around that. And actually, because we've used an air cooler and we're not adding any extra fans, the rest should be very straightforward, because all we need is the graphics card and the power supply. Should we do the graphics card first? because that's the most fun bit. And yes, this is a 4080 Super Supreme. I think we used this once on the channel before. I'm not sure if that was the Super or the normal version. Comes with a mouse mat, but obviously if you haven't got one already, why haven't you bought the PC Centric mouse mat? Available from pccentric.store. But there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that this Supreme has to be one of the best looking, if not the best looking graphics cards on the market today. Because I mean, just look at this thing. It's genuinely beautiful. I mean, a lot of products these days in PC gaming can be like over gamified, but I think this literally has a bit of edge. I mean, nothing sharp, hopefully, but it stands out. It looks different. It looks very premium, but then it also would kind of fit in with any sort of gaming PC, really. I like the color choice on this. You have this back plate as well. You've kind of got this like diamond effect on that. Should we get it in our rig? I think we're going to need a screwdriver for this, so we can actually remove our slot covers. But whilst we're doing this, obviously not sponsored by Nvidia, but you do get all of the Nvidia features by going for a 40 series card as well. I'm quite keen to see what they do with their next generation. I'm sure there'll be something different when it comes to software, and a lot of their stuff has been pretty good, to be fair. Things obviously like DLSS, better ray tracing. Oh, that is quite a big card. There you are, secures down into position. You do actually get inside this box this little stand as well, so if you're worried about sag, nice, simple solution. Look, how does that song go? You raise me up. Don't think they were talking about the RTX 4080 Supreme. I mean, don't get me wrong, there is definitely every chance that this won't work and I've done something completely wrong or I've broken something. Hopefully not. But I've got to say, I'm pretty impressed actually. Again, as soon as you use an air cooler, it does make everything a whole lot quicker. And because they're not mucking about, I mean, this has taken what? 1 hour 13, including all of the numerous retakes from when I flutter my words everywhere. So I think that's pretty darn good. Last piece of the puzzle then is going to be this, the power supply, the 8850GL. This is actually one of my all-time favorite power supplies, which is probably an odd thing to say, because let's be honest, it's never the most interesting. Obviously you can buy higher end units than this, like will be more efficient, but this kind of gives you everything that you need. Main one really being you get this 12 volt high power connection as well, 850 watts, more than enough for this particular rig. All of the cables that you need, and you don't have to use the ones that you don't. And something else that I really love about this is that you have this little safety yellow on this. So when you plug this into your graphics card and to your power supply, if you can't see any yellow, it's plugged in properly. And if you can see a little bit of yellow, it's not. You will need to move some of those cables, but yeah, look, plenty of room. That just sits in there like that. Obviously route through all of the cables to their respective positions. We will also need to plug in this SATA connection for a fan and RGB hub. Just need to plug in our ATX. And I've got to say actually, the way they've done the cable management with this kind of like right angled grommet here really works quite well actually, because everything kind of angles around nicely. Fair play, MSI. Then we have our definitely more fiddly bit with the CPU connections at the top left. The graphics card's a lot easier, just plugs in down there. And then last but certainly not least, you have that little 8-pin that is just underneath the graphics card there. Not 100% sure whether everyone needs to use this or whether it is device dependent, but if you have the connector, it makes sense to do it now rather than later. But otherwise, I think actually the rig is now complete. I mean, obviously I do need to do our cable management because we just have a few things down here, but because you have so much room, clearly not going to be an issue. When we get our pieces back, I reckon I don't even need to use a strap. All of that just parks down there. Then we'll grab our top piece and do the same. You would essentially never know around the back that there are any cables there. And I love that option. Now, when we move round to the other side, the one thing I will say that I don't like is just this bit up here. All we needed was some grommets or something just to cover it up, because obviously they've put all the cables there. This is where the RGB hub is. So you could definitely get around this. You could like get a bit of rubber yourself or just anything non-conductive and kind of hide these bits at the top. If you're using a 360 rad, I imagine that would definitely hide a lot of it, so you probably wouldn't notice it, so maybe it's just an air cooler problem. But clearly having all of these cables coming down and visible in this hole wasn't the best use of design. But overall, as you saw, this was so easy to build in, especially with this air cooler. And obviously it's very expandable, you've got extra room on the top, on the bottom as well. And I think it looks super clean. So as long as this works, I've got to say this was one of the easiest gaming PCs I've built in a long, long time. And I really like that. And because this is such a high-end rig, I think it's time to actually pair this with a suitably high-end monitor. This is a 32-inch QD OLED 4K 240Hz HDR from MSI. And it's got a glossy panel. Nothing happens. I assume that's because the button's not been turned on around the side. So moment of truth then, is this going to work? Let's find out. Well, all of our fans are spinning, always a good sign. Looks like we don't have RGB for our cooler though, so clearly I haven't plugged that in properly. That will have to be a quick fix. But are we actually going to get a signal is the big question. Yes, there we are. And we're in the BIOS. That was pretty easy actually. Go to memory, make sure Expo is enabled, move over to fan profile, and then here you can set up some custom curves and things. Essentially, you don't want your PC to run loudly when it doesn't need to. And then last but not least, if you did want to overclock this, then you could go to PBO or Precision Boost Overdrive and fiddle with the settings, and it'll put more power into your chip, and obviously you can get more performance. But until we've actually tested how this works with this particular cooler, I don't want to do that. So all that's left to do then is to grab a copy of Windows on our USB flash drive, and I must admit I've forgotten which one has which version. So it's going to be a surprise whether we're using 23 or 24. So just follow the instructions. If you don't have a product key yet, that's fine. Obviously you can buy one later and add it in, and then hit install. I thought it blue screened then. I was like, surely not already. We've only just got it on here. And so then everyone, through the power of actually a very high-pitched voice today, I can say we are now all set up and ready to go. We left everything installing over lunch. Lunch was very good actually. It was a Jamaican like ginger curry. It was great. Anyway, that aside, I've got to say I love the setup we've got going on here. Honestly, I think it really works. I was definitely a little bit skeptical about how this air cooler would look and would tie into the system. But as I say, I think it really works. I think we've got something that's, well, as long as the temperatures obviously are acceptable and good, something that's obviously going to save you a load of money in what is otherwise obviously a very premium setup. The RGB, I actually quite like to keep it white, and the RAM now kind of perfectly matches the Supreme. So I quite like it as it is, but obviously you'll be able to control pretty much everything through the MSI motherboard software if you want to go down that route, which is good. But you do also have this little LED button on the case, so you can cycle through a few different presets and things. Personally, I kind of prefer this because it means you don't have to have the software, but obviously if you want to tie everything in, then that is going to be the best way to do it. And then as I say, we've got our OLED monitor here running 4K 240 FPS. We've got some Call of Duty Warzone, so let's see how it performs. And here we go then, moment of truth. How is it going to perform? Is it going to be a struttery mess? Are you joking? The parachute doesn't automatically open. Since when? I swear it does. All right then, I guess we're starting in the gulag. I better win this match. And we've currently got this set to 4K, but we have DLSS set to quality actually. Oh, I'm not going to win that, am I? Oh! And we're getting around about 118 FPS. Obviously, if you had an RTX 4090, it would be higher. You can turn DLSS down and things like that. I'd normally cut this out of the video,
but I hate this game so much.
And this is the sort of crap why. I mean, it's not the end of the world. I suppose we can just spectate and we'll still get the same frame rate, but it's still annoying. But yes, when we actually hit the ground, and it's obviously not so much of an easy area as it is in the gulag, yeah, around about 130, 120 FPS. So obviously this is now half the refresh rate of this monitor, but this is very premium. Not everyone has this. And realistically, if you are going to be playing a game like Warzone, chances are you want to turn some of the settings down because you want the highest possible frame rate, in particular the resolution. So let's give that a go. So let's go into the graphics options. We'll turn this down to 1440p. Then we go to the quality settings, maybe change this to balanced, turn the textures back up, keep everything else as it is. And then hopefully when we go back into the game, yes, absolutely, you should see a pretty monumental shift in the frame rate, because we're now getting around about 244 FPS, which is not too shabby whatsoever. But to correct a mistake that I actually made, big shout out to the person that actually, there's only one person I'd like to add, no one else noticed. That one person that told me there is actually an FPS cap buried in the settings somewhere. Yeah, there it is, custom frame rate limit, 250. Turn this off. Return to the game, and obviously, as you'd expect, the frame rate remains the same because on this particular system, we're still bottlenecked by the GPU. But it's definitely worth noting, especially if you're going to be playing at 1080p or you are going to be using a 4090, then this frame rate cap might come into play. But yes, bear this in mind. I hold my hands up, I was wrong. If you do pair this with an RTX 4090, I did extra testing, and you can typically get maybe 260, 270, 280 FPS at 1440p at competitive settings with a 4090. So it's not night and day difference, but you will be limited still by the CPU in that particular scenario, so bear this in mind. Moving on to our next title though, we have something that I am actively playing right now. I've already put about 21 hours into it, kind of addicted. Starts good, gets very slow, and you think, maybe this isn't the one for me, and then it suddenly gets really good. My advice, don't do the side missions initially, stick with the story, unlock the really cool characters, and then it's a lot better. Speaking of cool characters, I mean, what do you make of the one I've created? If you put him in the low voice and you get an English accent, he sounds really hard, mate, so that was the way I wanted to go. But this is currently set to the Ultra preset. It is going to be, well, the frame rate's going to vary depending on, again, where and when you are in the title, but actually I find, generally speaking, there's not too much variance between the different areas. This is probably one of the lighter ones, and we're getting around about 100 FPS or so. This is set to Ultra settings, although we have turned the ray tracing up to Ultra, and we've also got the ray tracing set to selective. So you don't always know when it is enabled and when it's not. But what I will say is that maybe it's just a bug, but if you have Ultra ray tracing disabled, then sometimes I find the ray tracing is noticeably like really grainy and weird. So I would actually either have it on Ultra or have it off or selective or whatever. You know, obviously you have a play around. Also turn the vignetting off because it's shocking in this game. It absolutely ruins it and makes everything purple. But yes, around about 100 FPS or so at 4K. I don't actually know what DLSS we've got on. It's probably set to automatic. Oh no, it's set to balanced. So I would set it to performance, and before anyone moans and says, oh, that's not real 4K, I play this on a 77-inch TV, 4K, sit relatively close. I cannot tell the difference between performance and balance unless I get close to the screen. So don't judge me, try it for yourself, enjoy the higher frame rates, and then we can talk about it. And yes, look, our frame rate is now increased to around about 110 to 120 FPS, and obviously on this display it looks absolutely beautiful. I know this is an MSI sponsored video, but I genuinely think this is the best looking panel on the planet right now when it comes to, well, gaming monitors, right? 32-inch, 4K, 240 FPS. There are a few different ones on the market, but personally I prefer it flat, and this is actually one of the cheaper ones, so I'd strongly consider this. If you are interested, I'll leave a link to it located down below. But yes, this is a pretty ridiculous way to play Dragon Age. But ladies and gentlemen, I now think it's time to almost sidestep to a very similar yet very different game, this one being some Star Wars Outlaws. And I currently got this set to the kind of like the highest quality settings I would use, and I'm actually very impressed because it is still working very well. So this is set to 4K. We do have DLSS set to performance in terms of super resolution. We've got frame gen enabled. So super resolution, don't forget, I know people still get confused about this. Super res actually decreases the latency because it means your frame rate will increase through like natural rasterization, well, rasterization improvements. Then you have frame generation. This can slightly increase your latency because essentially it adds an extra step to the pipeline where you use AI to generate a frame in between those rendered frames, which makes the game look smoother and the frame rate increases, but the latency actually will go up slightly. And my magic number, as always, is around about 55 to 60 milliseconds of latency. If you can stay below that, then honestly, you're going to be really pleased with the results. And at the moment, I am very pleased with the results because, I mean, just look how good this game can look. I know it's been a little bit disappointing to some people, but I think it kind of depends how invested you were and how much you were anticipating the game, right? I mean, I still, as you can tell, haven't actually got very far through it whatsoever. Everything just happened all at once. Dragon Age came out. I've got no excuse when I put 20 hours into that, but hey, enjoying that. So I will get round to properly playing this all the way through, and I'm really hoping that I will enjoy it. But one thing that I definitely can enjoy, and I know some people will cringe, but it's true, and that is the ray tracing in this game, because they clearly thought about it pretty much from day one. I don't think you can actually not have ray tracing enabled on this game. I think you need a RTX GPU, or a ray trace GPU, I should say, to actually be able to play this game. And when you have it turned up like we have here, so this is ultra settings and that direct lighting set to medium, you can really see that this is a cut above quite a lot of other games. It looks really realistic, and actually at around about 80 to 90 FPS, I don't think that is too shabby whatsoever. And for a game like this that's going to be fast paced but nothing crazy, probably around about 80 to 120 FPS is a good solid window between getting that balance between high performance gaming, high frame rate, but then obviously all the visual quality. But I will say that if you do want to go into the settings, go into graphics, and then go down the bottom and you can turn direct lighting off. This will give you quite a big boost to the frame rate actually. You turn this off. Obviously the lighting now doesn't look quite as good, but I mean, it depends again what you kind of favor. 4080 Super can clearly handle it, but if you're on a lower end card, I would advise turning this off. But yes, your frame rate now goes to around about 115, 120 FPS or so. So it definitely feels a fair bit nicer, and if you are going to be doing a lot of like pop shotting and stuff, I really do sound pretty cringe. If you're aiming basically and you're moving the camera around a lot, then yes, a higher frame rate is definitely better. But it's nice to have the option here, and it's nice to be able to play the game at max quality details without really much compromise. But ladies and gentlemen, I've definitely saved the absolute best to last. It's a game I've been waiting for ages.
Cost me 40 UK pounds.
It's some Planet Coaster 2. And I was really hoping that it was going to be like brand new engine, change everything, and wasn't so CPU demanding. I was wrong. Let's start off by going into the settings in this one. Obviously, we do want to have our full resolution, NVIDIA Reflex low latency. Not really the game where you're going to notice a big difference, but it's because we have DLSS frame gen in this, which again, if you're on a lower end card, could definitely be really helpful. Or to be fair, something like this, where you are going to be CPU bound, it's going to give you extra FPS, and we will try in just a second. But do make sure that you turn motion blur and depth of field off. They have changed it, so this is off by default. Who tests these games, right? The first time you opened it up and you had depth of field on, literally like half of what you were seeing was really blurry and looked terrible, but they've now fixed it. So keep these settings disabled. Everything else we can set to ultra, DLSS quality, frame gen enabled. And then when we go back into our park, what is the frame rate going to be? Well, it's still kind of disappointing, around about 120 FPS. Now, it's not disappointing because it looks bad or anything. I think this looks ridiculous. Like, this is still a relatively small park. And actually, fair play, because the amount of detail that you've got on this is really, really good. I find that you can go down to a really like granular level and everything still looks good. I mean, it's going to be a very easy game to almost overlook because you kind of like pan out and then it's like, yeah, you know, it looks decent. Just when you look at the attention to detail on some of the rides and things, it's very difficult to actually make it look bad. And I think that is really quite difficult to do. I mean, you could maybe complain that some of the character models are a little bit basic, but again, when you think how many of them and what the CPU has to do, that's fair enough. And then the one thing that I've noticed that really does annoy me is that the animations when you zoom out are 30 FPS, so it does look weird if everything else is like really high frame rate. But interestingly enough, it doesn't seem as if frame gen actually makes a massive difference, because if you look at the top right corner of your screen, you can see we're getting around about 100, 120 FPS or so, which looks great, especially bearing in mind that our GPU load is around about 97, so you think fantastic. But as someone that's been playing this with frame gen turned off, not really sure why to be honest, forgot. When we go back into the settings and we turn off frame gen, you will now see that the full story should reveal itself. Oh, okay, maybe not. All right, I lied. We are GPU bound. I thought we were going to be CPU bound. It's because I've been playing on a 4090, okay? I understand. So yes, if you want to play this game at 4K, then you are going to be getting around about 80 to 100 FPS or so, which, as I say, is still plenty in a game like this. You don't really need more than 60, let alone like 80 to 100 FPS. So yes, this is going to be a great way to play, but just to demonstrate what I was saying, if we turn this down to 1440, we hit apply, we should then start to hit the bottleneck that I've been seeing. No, still not convinced, to be honest with you. Maybe they've updated this because I played this at launch. Maybe that was the problem. We're still getting a little bit of flickering on the water, actually. That's a little bit annoying. Well, on a 4090 with the highest end CPU, a 9800X3D, doesn't actually look like we are particularly bottlenecked by the CPU at all. Should we turn this all the way down? Look, 1080p. And we're still GPU bound. Okay, forget everything I said. Clearly, they've made improvements since the last time I've played. If you're playing on this system, it looks as if you are going to be bottlenecked by the GPU. Everything at Ultra anyway.
I feel stupid.
Fortunately for all of us though, the thing that hasn't been stupid throughout this video has actually been this gaming PC, because honestly, I think it looks absolutely fantastic. Everything is tied in together really, really well. And I just think overall, I've been really happy with the results. I mean, not everything in this is a cheap component, let's be honest, but at least the CPU cooler will save you a whole bunch of money, as I say, on a good day, about $25, $30. I think it really works, really ties in. And actually, in terms of thermals, we're getting around about 55, 56 degrees on the graphics card, which is why I didn't bother putting any fans down the bottom, because clearly that's not necessary. And then actually, interestingly, in terms of CPU thermals, only around about 67 degrees or so whilst in a game. So obviously, if you're going to be doing like 100% loads all of the time, you could step this up and you'd probably get better results. But I mean, realistically, this is still a chip that in an not in an ideal world, it's still configured really to run hot if it needs to. So we're nowhere near the 95-degree max of this chip. So really, really good results. I'm really happy with this. And actually, in terms of noise, again, like literally nothing. This is on the desk, silent room, you can't hear it. This is perfect. Just do make sure that you tune your fans. And this is precisely why, like for me, like gaming laptops, unless you specifically need the portability, always get a desktop, because the overall experience I think is just so much better. But smash the like button if you've enjoyed this, get yourself subscribed, and of course, if you do want to check out current pricing on anything that was featured in this video, as always, you can find this listed down below with our affiliate links. But thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.